Hello and welcome to Rest and Recharge 101. So the webinar series I am offering in April, we are focusing on stress primarily. April is Stress Awareness Month. So this presentation is going to focus on that. So positive stress, negative stress, how to manage it, things like that. I did just link the presentation in the chat. So if anyone wants it, it is there available for you. I'm also happy to email it to anyone after we're done today if you would like that. But I won't be able to see the chat while I'm screen sharing. So it is there available for you. If anyone has any questions while we're going through this, I would certainly encourage you to come off mute and ask them, or I will try to wrap up a couple minutes early and address any questions that you might have. So moving forward, first off, I want to talk, I know PayPal as well as Exos both operate on pillars of methodology. So we've got 4 pillars, and those are mindset, movement, nutrition, and recovery. And of course, each pillar is equally important. We really can't overlook any of them, but it does seem that sometimes we tend to think that certain pillars are less important than others. So hopefully by the time we're done today, you'll have a little bit better understanding of not only why each of these is important, but the role that it plays in stress management. So the first thing to talk about are just some little retrain your brain tricks. I don't want to call them tricks actually, but some things we can do when we are encountering a stressful situation or under chronic stress, deadlines, anything like that. One of the first things is to address breathing. By taking a moment and just being aware of our breathing, it can actually calm that stress response and help us to refocus. I just shared one type of breathing here today, and that is called box breathing. It's a little bit counterintuitive at first, but if you've never tried it before, I want to take you through just a couple rounds of it so you get a little bit of an idea. But even just doing box breathing for a couple minutes can actually greatly reduce the stress response and allow your body to calm down. So the way it goes is you're going to breathe in over 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out over 4 seconds, and here's the counterintuitive part. Hold your breath again for 4 seconds. And it's actually that last hold that really has a big impact on our nervous system. So let's try that really quickly. So you're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. I think I messed that up. And breathe in again. 2, 3, 4. All right. So that was just a couple rounds of that. But if you kind of really pay attention to that hold at the end, after a couple minutes, you really will feel a change in your stress level, your anxiety level, and your ability to focus. One of the next tools in our tool belt is practicing gratitude. And that can be really challenging in a stressful situation or even under chronic stress. But even the most devastating situation, there's always things that we can look towards in those situations that we can be thankful for. I mean, super quick example, and I'm sure lots of folks have examples, but the whole situation right now in Russia and the Ukraine, for example, as horrible as the situation is, and there's so many different facets going on over there, I do actually know a few people that took that situation and after they sort of processed what was going on, immediately thought, what can I do to help? What can I do to help others? Is there some way that I can have an impact on people who are suffering? And I do think even if it's us that's in that situation, there's always something we can look to, whether it's we are grateful for what we have, if there's a way that we can use that situation to help someone else, even that sort of thing can help shift our perspective and increase resilience. Because then we're operating in a way that is allowing us to do something greater than ourselves or even outside of ourselves. The next one that most folks probably have not heard of is what's called cognitive flexibility. And if that's a new term for you, it's basically the ability to think creative or laterally and adapt to changing situations. A lot of us are creatures of habit, and when our routines are altered, typically in ways that we don't want or that are not invited, that can actually really stress us out. Being adaptable or flexible to changing situations can really help protect against certain types of stress and, of course, unhealthy coping mechanisms. A lot of research indicates that people who are able to do that are less vulnerable to things like emotional eating and other undesirable stress management methods. Folks who kind of have an all or nothing, like I'm either doing great or everything's terrible sort of way of thinking, tend to struggle a lot more when something comes their way and kind of messes up their routine or their method, or just their daily habits and things like that. But there's a lot of evidence as well that people who are able to adapt to those changing situations tend to be more resilient, generally less stressed out, not perceiving really stressful events as stressful as they might be for others, and usually generally able to stick to healthy habits a little bit better than those who kind of have that rigid all or nothing thinking. If you're kind of interested to know where you might rank on that, you can take this free assessment. It'll just kind of give you an idea, because it's not something that most people are just born with. I mean, to some degree, but it's something that you can practice, and becoming more aware of it can help you to be more adaptable. So realistically though, persistent cumulative stress can be challenging for anyone and can cause us to be less cognitively flexible, but just being aware of that can go a long, long way. So, I mean, really, it's just the idea that stressors in our life, whatever they are, if it's work deadlines, family, health issues, as I already mentioned, if it's a humanitarian crisis, whatever it may be, we can either perceive those as damaging and debilitating and as if they're disrupting our lives, or we can take a step back and go, okay, maybe I need to grieve this a little bit and process it, but now that I've done that, how can I use what has happened to improve not only myself, but possibly improve the lives of others? Or what can I learn that's going to allow me to continue to move forward, even though I have to change the way I want to do things now? So viewing it that way can really increase learning. It can foster improvement not only in your personal life, but in your career as well, and foster personal growth. Folks that see all stress as harmful tend to be less resilient and have a harder time bouncing back from that sort of thing. So let's take a look at positive physical stress. I mean, we have negative stress and we have positive stress. Exercise is typically considered positive physical stress. We have to put some stress on our bodies if we want our bodies to adapt, become healthier, and things like that. There's many, many reasons that exercise is considered not only a great way to manage stress, but that positive physical stress can be beneficial in multiple areas of our lives. So the first one is catharsis. I mean, we're just releasing energy. We are reducing stress simply because we are taking our bodies through movement. It has been shown to reduce anxiety, improve and stabilize mood, and of course increase confidence. Establishing a regular exercise routine tends to help people feel almost like they're a little bit more of control of things, even if they aren't in control of things, and really helps to increase motivation. As you can see, there's lots of chemicals that are released by our bodies when we do start to exercise. So whether it's a walk or a run or whatever it is, weightlifting, our bodies will release endorphins, and they will start to kick in kind of after you get warmed up. And basically the purpose of endorphins is to really relieve pain and help to reduce that sense of stress on the body. Dopamine influences mood and feelings of reward and motivation. Serotonin helps to stabilize mood, enhancing feelings of well-being and happiness. And you might recognize those two hormones are hormones that are highly regulated through certain prescription medications, such as Paxil, like different antidepressant drugs. And exercise can actually give us almost that same effect. It's really powerful. And then, of course, adrenaline, that's like our fight or flight hormone. But that's going to allow us to increase our rate of circulation, breathing, and stuff like that. Of course, we don't want too much of that all the time because that can start to have a negative impact. And that's the reason I put this note on the bottom here, and that is balance. Because as great as exercise is for us, moderate exercise will increase our immune system, it will increase our resiliency, it will help to reduce and manage stress. However, if we exercise too much without adequate recovery, that's going to actually have the opposite effect. Our immune system will go down, we will struggle in all sorts of ways. So I'll get a little bit more into that here in just a second. I do want to point out first that, of course, all types of exercise can be very beneficial to be cathartic and to help manage stress and, of course, improve our fitness levels. But there is a lot of research that suggests that low intensity, steady state exercise is really, really beneficial for stress relief for a couple of reasons. It does help to refocus the mind. Sometimes when you're working out really hard, your focus is on that. Gentle movement, like a gentle walk or an easy jog, a gentle bike ride, something like that, can really kind of help us just refocus our mind and zone back in on things that are really important to us. But the low intensity, steady state exercise also has a very rhythmic, repetitive nature. So different than, let's say, something like CrossFit or weight training, where it's not really a rhythm, you're moving from one exercise to another. When you get in the rhythm of a walk or a hike or a gentle bike ride or even swimming, it's almost like crashing waves on the seashore. You kind of come to expect each foot strike or each pedal, and that rhythmic nature can actually, in and of itself, decrease our stress response. So I think that is really powerful and something that probably a lot of folks are not aware of. Now, if we overdo it, that is where we get into trouble. And I get a question a lot from folks like, how can I possibly be overtraining if I'm just, working out for 30 minutes a day or 45 minutes or something like that? I'm not a professional athlete. And one of the things that we need to consider is that we have to really take into account everything that we are doing in our lives. So if we are trying to squeeze in a 30 or 45-minute workout, but we feel like we're always on the go, it's hard to catch up with things or stay on top of things, maybe you're not sleeping as well as you'd like to, you've got deadlines at work, you're running your kids around, whatever, your body doesn't have a chance to recover from the exercise, that positive physical stress that you've given it. So instead of building up, it will start to wear down. And that's sort of exactly the opposite of what we want. But your body will provide signals that you need a little more recovery, and it's really good to be aware of what those signals are so that it doesn't progress too far that you end up having damage that could be irreparable. It takes a long time for it to get to that point usually, but I've known many people that end up with adrenal fatigue because they are not allowing their bodies to rest as much as they need to, and it's very hard to recover from it once it gets that far. For most people, taking action for even a few days or a week can make all the difference in the world. So if you're experiencing any of these things, like you're just sore all the time, and of course that's on a case-by-case basis. Some of that can be repetitive motion from your job and things like that. But with regard to fitness or your personal life or your career or anything like that, if you feel like you've just hit a wall, you're trying hard, but you're just not getting anywhere, you almost feel like you're going backwards, that's a huge indication that you probably need a little rejuvenation, refocus, and things like that if you're going to start making progress again. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But as I already mentioned, if we are going too much, too hard all the time without enough recovery, our immune systems will actually suffer as well. A really good indication of this is if your heart rate starts changing. So, of course, most people can look at their heart rates on, let's say, your Apple Watch or your Fitbit or something like that. It will give you a relatively good indication of what your resting heart rate is and your average. You can also, of course, just take it on your own. The best way to do that would be first thing in the morning when you wake up casually without an alarm to just find your pulse either with 2 fingers at the base of your neck underneath your jaw or on your wrist, so your radial pulse. And you can just look at your watch and count the number of times your heart beats for 30 seconds and just double it. But let's say your normal resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute. Well, if you're really starting to feel worn down and things like that, or things just feel harder and more challenging for you, and you start to notice that your resting heart rate is 65, 67, 70, it's several beats above what it normally is, that's a really big red flag that your body is letting you know that you need a little bit more recovery. It's not getting what it needs. So that's a great indication of that. And some ways that we can kind of prevent that negative physical stress. So again, as I mentioned, exercise, of course, is very beneficial. But if we have so much else going on, we really need to focus on that recovery. So the first one would be training periodization. That's just a fancy word for meaning we don't work out at the same intensity all the time. So anyone who has ever even watched a team sport or is aware of team sports, you know that professional teams or any team, they have preseason, in-season, postseason, and off-season. They don't train the same way year-round. You can't possibly do that. If you train like you're in preseason all the time, by the time you're halfway through your season, you'll be burnt out and injured. That applies to everyone. Just because we're not professional athletes necessarily doesn't mean we don't need to vary the intensity of our training and perhaps not put the same stress on our bodies all the time. If anyone has questions about that, of course, I'm happy to address what that might look like in your own personal health and fitness journey, because it is going to vary depending on fitness level, the kind of activities you're doing, and things like that. Another thing to look at is calorie intake and distribution. So, of course, lack of nutrients can always be a major problem and can inhibit our body's ability to recover and repair, but also poorly timed meals. I've found with a lot of folks that they tend to, because they get busy, understandably, they skip breakfast or they hardly eat lunch, and whenever they're working out, maybe they're working out in the morning and they don't get a chance to really eat breakfast or anything like that, and then they eat most of their calories later in the day. If we're not eating our meals equally balanced throughout the day, even if we're not exercising, that can make it more challenging for our bodies to actually recover from all the stresses that we put on it throughout the day. And then if you have any nutritional gaps in your diet, that can be really important. A nutritional deficiency, whether it's from one of our macronutrients, proteins, carbohydrates, or fats, or whether it's a micronutrient, a vitamin, a mineral, something like that, any nutritional deficiencies can actually very significantly negatively impact our body's ability to recover and adequately manage stress. If you're not sure if you have nutritional deficiencies, of course there's some things that I could help you figure that out with, but I am not a registered dietitian. I can give folks guidance, but the best way to know if you are actually deficient in any minerals or vitamins or anything like that is to go to your doctor. Of course, your health insurance will cover, an annual physical, and you can ask your doctor to do regular blood work that includes what's called a metabolic profile. And that will actually clearly indicate if perhaps you are lacking in any nutrients. So that can be a really helpful tool. And then once you're aware of any nutritional deficiencies, you can work to correct them, and your body will thank you for that. So, physical stress recovery. As I already mentioned, if you're trying to work out at the same intensity like every day or even just too often, that can be really detrimental overall. You're going to reach a point of diminishing returns where your body just can't come back from it. So just some active types of recovery that we can engage in. Recovery doesn't have to mean you just sit on your couch and don't do anything. In fact, that might actually do more harm than good and create stiffness and make it a little more challenging to recover. But active recovery includes things like stretching, just going through range of motion. It can actually help to decrease soreness, improve circulation, and it increases activity in the part of our nervous system which allows us to relax. Foam rolling, I realize not everyone has a foam roller, but it's kind of like what's called a self-myofascial release or foam massage. And you can get them relatively inexpensively, even on Amazon or something like that. But if you don't have a foam roller and you want to try that, there's a lot of techniques that I'd be happy to share with anyone. If you're not familiar with that, just let me know. But you could even use something like a rolling pin with a towel wrapped around it, or even a frozen water bottle to kind of roll those tight muscles, and that can actually create some of the same feel-good hormones and substances in our bodies that happen when we exercise. So the things like endorphins and serotonin, so whether it's self-massage or someone else is giving you a massage, those things can all go a long way to reducing levels of stress-related hormones and how well our body can cope with what we're subjecting it to every day. A couple of other things, Epsom salt baths are very, very helpful. They're actually, it's not proven, but I personally love feeling that. Just soaking in warm water can really help. You can do a little self-massage while you're soaking, and it does seem like it reduces muscle soreness. I understand there's different theories about that, but that can be a very helpful thing. And then progressive muscle relaxation, which is simply the idea of being aware of the muscle groups in your body. And if you go from, it doesn't have to be from feet to face, it can be the opposite direction, but contracting and then purposefully relaxing the muscle groups in each part of your body can help to do things like reduce those stress hormones, reduce blood pressure, and really help you become more aware of places that your body might just even be holding tension that you didn't realize before. Sleep. So I'm not going to get too into sleep today. I just wanted to give you a sneak preview. Next week I will be doing a presentation. I believe it's on Tuesday, but you'll have to check your calendars. I believe it's Tuesday at noon, but noon Pacific time that is, about called Pillow to Podium, about what really happens during sleep, all the important things that you need to know about it, what happens when we don't sleep enough. But just to be aware right now that according to the CDC, less than 30% of working adults sleep less than 6 hours a night. That is very detrimental, really, when it comes to stress management, as well as many, many other things. So we'll get a little bit more into that next week, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there because I've actually heard, just even in the last week, from several people that it's hard for them to recognize how important sleep is. It seems like a waste of time, and I think that's a common mindset. In fact, our bodies need sleep to rebuild and repair more than almost anything else we can possibly do. Same thing, we're going to talk more about circadian rhythms next week, but just to understand, too, for now, that if we throw our circadian rhythms off, and basically that's the 24-hour clock that our bodies operate with, if we, for example, become too accustomed to being up too late at night, not sleeping well through the night, and things like that, it can really throw us off. And that can really mess up how well our bodies can recover, even produce new red blood cells. We'll talk more about that next week, but having those rhythms thrown off can greatly increase stress. That's something that people who work like graveyards or later shifts tend to struggle with a lot, just because of their different sleep habits and patterns. So again, we'll talk more about that, but I'd be happy to answer any questions when we're done. All right, we're getting towards the end here. So a few things I wanted to talk about, and I will be talking more about nutrition and stress. I'm doing another presentation called Invisible Stress. stress. Again, check your calendars for that. That will be April 26th. And we're going to explore a little bit more some of those things that if you're experiencing symptoms of stress but you're not sure exactly where it's coming from, to help you identify some of those places that you might not even be aware of so that they can be addressed. So there are actually there's a lot of research that indicates that different types of foods can either increase our body's stress response and make recovery more difficult or even cause stress, and types of foods that will have the opposite effect, that will have anti-inflammatory properties, that will actually help our bodies to rebuild and repair and recover from mental, physical, all kinds of emotional, any kind of stress that we are undergoing. So it may seem kind of, it almost seems counterintuitive sometimes to think what we're putting in our mouth can have that big of an impact on our mental and physical health, state of health and stress, but it really does. So, for example, certain foods will actually have an impact on our cortisol levels. Now, we need cortisol for certain things, like we need that first thing in the morning to help us wake up. It is part of our fight or flight response. We need that cortisol, but having increased circulating levels of it all the time can actually cause us to crave more foods that are considered comfort foods, things that are high in sugar, fat, salt, stuff like that. And those types of foods, highly processed foods, actually can have inflammatory properties that can cause systemic inflammation in our bodies, and it can lead to other sorts of, or maybe not even lead to, but for those who are genetically predisposed to develop certain chronic diseases, it will speed that process along. There are lots of foods, though, that actually help to produce that serotonin that we've already talked about, that helps to calm us and improve our mood and things like that. And that's found in a lot of things like whole grains. And that is one major reason, among others, that it's really not a good idea to cut major food groups out of your diet, because our bodies benefit from all of them. Vitamin C, which of course is found in fresh fruits and vegetables, actually really helps reduce the levels of stress hormones in our body, and it is a key element in connective tissue production. I think a lot of folks don't know that, but vitamin C is a vital part of what actually creates the stuff that holds our cells together. It's called ground substance, and without enough of it, our bodies will not be as strong, and that can lead to lots of other major health issues. But of course, it also aids in strengthening our immune system. It helps to protect our cell walls from all the different things that our bodies encounter. So if you think of the word antioxidant, the way it protects our cell walls, think about this. If you cut open an apple, it's going to do what? It's going to get brown. As soon as it's exposed to the air, we call that oxidation. So to prevent that from happening, we squeeze a little lemon juice or something on it. And that greatly slows down or prevents that apple from getting brown. The turning brown is literally a representation of the cell walls breaking down, and that's why it also gets sweeter. It changes the chemical structure. It does the same thing in our bodies. So vitamin C and antioxidants in general help to protect our cell walls from breaking down, and instead protects them from the oxidative damage that can happen just through normal metabolic processes. And then omega-3 fatty acids, and I'll talk more about that in other presentations as well, but they have a significant role in inflammation, specifically anti-inflammatory, and can help prevent major surges in stress hormones. So this is just kind of another little summary, thinking about really processed foods can actually be harmful, not only to our immune system, but to how well our bodies can handle stress and our coping mechanisms. Something I do want to point out here is, this is not saying, it says processed carbohydrates. Notice it does not say all carbohydrates. By processed, it's more representative of some of the things that are shown here. So when we think processed, it means all the fiber is taken out. There's probably additives and preservatives in there. Think pastries, candy, stuff like that. We absolutely need complex carbohydrates, such as the things that are found in oats, in whole fruits and vegetables, in potatoes, and things like that. So we're not saying that we don't need those things. What we're saying is those things that are highly processed can be damaging. And I think everyone knows that sugar can be problematic, but artificial sweeteners, there's a lot of research on, some of the different things that those could possibly do to your body. I don't know that it's proven, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that suggests certain types of them, if consumed in enough quantity, can actually cause things like headaches. They can cause changes in our metabolism and in our ability to regulate blood sugar. And if you think about it, what are artificial sweeteners usually put in? They're usually not put in super health foods. They're usually put into things like that are also highly, highly processed and refined, that can contain lots of preservatives that can have detrimental effects on our bodies as well. Processed meats and fried food and fast foods have been very, very closely tied to high levels of inflammation, and a cascade of other things that can happen. But I do want to point out too, so some of the stress relieving foods, those of you that have listened to any of my presentations before know that I've talked about just because a food is healthy doesn't mean we need it in giant quantities. So nuts are very good for you. Of course, healthy fats like omega-3s, we need those. Is dark chocolate good for you? Absolutely. But if you're someone who is mindful of your weight, it doesn't mean we need to be eating a whole dark chocolate bar. One little tiny square of it each day provides plenty of those antioxidants and stress relieving properties. So we still need to be aware of the amount that we're consuming, even though those foods are healthy for us. So we're almost done here, and I'm going to wrap it up. Something really important to consider, especially for people who are exercising, and that is timing your nutrition around your workouts. I mentioned this already a little bit, but without adequate intake of especially carbohydrates, proteins, fluids, and electrolytes right after training, our bodies will not recover as well as they could. You have a window after a hard workout. Now, I'm not talking about like just walking your dog, but if you're doing a really hard workout where your heart rate's getting up, you're breathing heavy and all that, we have a window of the maximal amount of time where our bodies are going to absorb almost everything that gets put into it, which is about 30 minutes after we're done with that workout. The farther away from that workout we get, the harder it is for our bodies to absorb everything. And what I mean by that is right after a hard workout, our muscles are like a sponge. And if we consume some easily digestible, complex carbohydrates and easily digestible protein within that 30-minute window, almost all of it, almost 90% of it is going to go to rebuild and repair the stress on those muscles and allow them to get stronger. The longer we wait, it's going to delay recovery. You're going to be sore for longer. And what will start to happen, folks have probably heard this word anabolic versus catabolic. We want to be in an anabolic state. And don't think that always means growing giant muscles. But what it means is that our muscles are going to be getting stronger, or at least maintain their integrity. Catabolic means it's going to start breaking down. If we don't get adequate amounts of protein and carbohydrate within a certain time frame around our workouts, we can start to head more towards that catabolic state, which nobody wants because that means your metabolism goes down. So I have lots of great handouts on some ideas and tips for that sort of thing. If anyone wants that, I'd be happy to share that with you. But suffice to say that within the first 30 to 60 minutes, ideally, you want to have things that are highly digestible. So like, let's say yogurt with some fruit, or maybe cottage cheese and fruit. If dairy's not a problem for you, you can have, some milk or something like that with fruit. A smoothie is a great idea after a workout. You don't need a ton, but most of the research suggests about a 4-to-1 ratio of carbohydrate to protein. Immediately after the workout is not a time to eat a salad and a giant piece of meat, even if that might be healthy for you, because it's going to sit in your stomach because of the fiber and all that sort of thing, and it's not necessarily going to get to the muscles. So you want something very quickly after the workout, and then probably within an hour to 2 hours, having a well-balanced meal that may be a little bit harder for your body to digest, that might be really healthy. All right, that is it. I might have gone a minute over there, but hopefully there's at least some little nugget in there that you can take and apply. Maybe one or two things you might be able to implement into your routine that can help you manage stress better if that's something you're struggling with. I also, again, did put some links here. The April newsletter, it is available here at this Exos at Home link from your browser. But the April newsletter has a lot of stress reducing recipes for some of those stress reducing foods we talked about, some great stress management tips and things like that. There's also a lot of that available here on Exos at Home. I do a weekly tip, some motivational type things, a weekly recipe, and if you visit there, it'll also show you all the other resources and information that are available to you virtually. And lastly, of course, if anyone has personal questions, please feel free to reach out. We can set up a time to communicate one-on-one or even communicate via email to address your personal health and fitness questions, and hopefully I can help you with that. So with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I would love to answer any questions that anyone might have. Thank you.